When it comes to Apex, recoil is one of the most important parts of becoming a great player. What's going on, guys? My name is Valued, and by the end of this video, you'll have a firm grasp on the recoil of every weapon in Apex Legends. But with that out of the way, we have a lot to talk about, so let's get right into the good stuff. To start, understanding the difference between ammo types is very important, like how heavy weapons tend to have a bit more kick per bullet than a light weapon. For example, the Wingman is going to have much higher recoil per bullet than a P2020 will, even though they're both single-fire pistols. And on the flip side, energy ammo and light ammo tend to have similar per bullet recoils, with energy weapons being a little bit tougher to control earlier in their spray patterns. Even though these don't have a giant effect on things, it's very useful to know when picking up a certain weapon type that you don't commonly use. But now that you understand this difference, let's hop into each of the weapons and talk a little bit more about their specific recoil patterns. And starting off, we have one of my favorite weapons, the Volt. The Volt has a very easy to control recoil pattern, but it's one that you need to understand how to control. When you shoot the Volt, it goes up to the right, then halfway through the clip, you'll notice it goes to the left and then centers out. So to counter this, pull down and to the left, then pull down to the right halfway through the mag, and you'll have perfect recoil on the Volt. Even though this gun has a super easy recoil pattern, it's important to understand because when you pick these guns up, you want to have muscle memory built up so that you don't have to think about controlling the recoil in mid-gunfight. And with the Volt out of the way, let's move on to a bit of a tougher gun, the R99. This gun does a ton of damage and is one of the most important ones to learn. And believe it or not, the pattern is actually quite simple as it trails almost entirely straight up until the last 15% of the clip or so. So to master the recoil on the R99, you need to pull down and slightly to the left halfway through the clip. And then finally, you pull back to the right for the remaining bullets in the clip. The thing about the R99 though is that you need to pull down a lot because the recoil kicks in really hard with this insanely fast shooting SMG. The R99 is a really tough one to master, but if you find yourself struggling, don't worry. The coaches over at ProGuides.com are the best way to learn how to use the more difficult weapon types and really maximize your performance in-game. Make sure to check it out in the description below. Alrighty guys, up next we have the most recent weapon that has returned to ground loot, the Prowler. This spectacular weapon not only has a nice recoil pattern for a heavy weapon, but with its burst mode being the only available mode, you get easier to control recoil. When ADSing, we find the recoil pattern to be pretty easy, but definitely can be difficult if you don't have a good idea of what to expect. Alright guys, so for what to expect, the recoil is pretty simple, like I said before. The first 3 bursts go up and to the left. Then they start taking a hard turn to the right. And finally, for the last 2 bursts with a purple mag, they center out. So to counter the recoil, you'll pull down to the right, then down left, and finally pull down to recenter your crosshair. If you guys take the time to master this recoil, the Prowler can be one of the strongest guns in the game. Alright guys, moving on, let's talk about perhaps the strongest AR in the entire game, the Flatline. This super popular heavy assault rifle is known for being one of the only guns that can out-DPS an R99 in close range combat. This gun also has an amazing hipfire up close, but it's also great with a 3x at long range once you get the pattern down. Unfortunately, the recoil pattern is one of the scariest that Apex has to offer, so get ready to shred through quite a bit of heavy ammo at long range. But to talk about the recoil, it goes like this. For the entire clip, the recoil goes up to the right for the first 10-15 bullets, then it starts going back and forth from left to right and right to left until you run out of ammo. So to counter it, you use a strat called jitter aiming, where you pull down and back and forth from right to left. Once you get this down, this gun is insanely powerful and should be used anytime you can find it. Strafing with this gun will also help reduce how intense the pattern is, but just keep practicing it and I promise you will dial it in if you use jitter aiming like we talked about. Alright guys, next up we have the Flatline's counterpart, the R301 carbine. Everybody knows the R301 and it's for one reason and one reason alone. It is super easy to beam people with this gun. The fire rate coupled with the recoil pattern allows it to be a threat at any range. And for the recoil pattern itself, it's very easy to control. You literally pull down for the first 15 bullets, and then pull down and back and forth from left to right using the strategy we talked about earlier. If you somehow haven't given this weapon a try, we definitely recommend you do because of its easy to control recoil and high DPS output. Alright guys, now let's move on to the gun that swapped places with the Prowler in the care package, the Spitfire. Now, we might not get to use the Spitfire as much as we have in recent seasons, but that definitely doesn't mean it's not worth spending time learning its pretty easy recoil pattern. The recoil for this weapon goes as follows. It pulls up to the left, then slightly shifts to the right, and continues this pattern until you finally unload its massive 55-round clip. This gun is super easy to control, and all you have to do is slightly pull down to the right and then the left, and repeat this for the entire mag. Now, it might sound like we're talking about the same patterns here for all these weapons, but the biggest thing that changes is how far you have to pull down and how far you have to pull from left to right. So this is going to change per weapon, and you definitely are going to want to try each of these out for yourselves. This gun's fire rate and kick allows it to be pretty accurate and amazing at chunking damage at a terrifying rate. When you find this gun, definitely pick it up because I promise you won't regret it. Alright guys, now let's move on to the next mid-long range weapon, the Scout. The Scout is great at putting damage down range quickly and with a pretty controllable recoil. When spammed, the recoil pattern is essentially a straight line for the first 75% of the magazine. It does a slight snaking to the left and right, but overall, it's pretty straight. At the end, it curves off to the right and trails off in a tight staircase-like pattern for the last 5%. To control this weapon, slightly pull down for the first 10 bullets, make sure you aren't spraying it, and then for the last bullets in the mag, pull down and in a small circle to control the recoil because it starts to kind of kick in a circular motion. I find that being patient with this weapon really allows for amazing consistency with a variety of scopes. Side note guys, if you are spamming this weapon, put a focus on pulling downward and near the end, pulling down to the left to make sure that you stay on target. And now that we got that down, let's take a look at the Wingman. The skill gap weapon itself doesn't actually have a very hard to control recoil. This gun, when spammed, has a large first shot recoil, but the fire rate allows it to shoot before it returns fully to the center. This means after the first shot, you'll get a tight stepping up to the right after every single shot. This means that once you get someone dialed in, you can quickly drop them by just holding down and to the left slightly after every single shot. If you practice doing this in the firing range with your friends, you'll be knocking out damage badges in no time. Alright guys, now let's move on to possibly the strongest weapon in Season 10, the LStar. This gun has gotten quite popular lately, and for good reason. It has an amazingly simple recoil pattern and an enormous damage potential. Recently, it got a buff to allow for attachments on it that even further helps with the recoil to be controlled. The LStar's recoil pattern is literally a straight line with minor snaking to the left and right until needing to be cooled down. If you practice how far you have to pull down to the right and to the left to counter the pattern, you're going to be vaporizing your opponents with this weapon. The biggest thing is you need to make sure that you are practicing in the firing range with these weapons that we're talking about. Alright guys, now let's move on to the newest weapon added to Apex, the Rampage. This slow firing brute of a weapon has a pretty interesting recoil pattern that should be high on your list to master. With such a high ammo capacity and slow fire rate, this thing can shoot for ages before you ever need to reload. This weapon starts off by firing directly up with a slight bend to the left. About 20% into the mag, it gets a bit more aggressive and goes to the left until about halfway through the mag. From there, it begins to go to the right at about the same angle as it was for the left. So to control this weapon, look to pull down to the right for the first half and then hard left for the last bit until the few shots. But guys, I am not kidding, you really should spend some time with this gun in the firing range since A, it's one of the newest weapons, and B, it's pretty tough to control, especially if you charge it up with a thermite nade. Alright guys, now on to the last energy weapon we're going to discuss today, we have the Havoc. The Havoc recently got a buff in its recoil and how easy it was to control. The weapon used to have crazy side-to-side movements in the entire pattern, but now it's more straight than ever. After the charge up, it shoots straight up with a slight bend to the right for the first 40% of the mag. Then it does an aggressive curve to the right and back to the left where it finishes the mag off trailing up and to the left. This is easily controlled by pulling down hard for the first half, then adjusting for the curve section. After that, you just pull down to the right pretty aggressively for the last bit, And there you have it. This gun has seen quite a few buffs to get to where it is, and it's definitely a bit underrated with the community. Alright guys, last but definitely not least on our list, we have the Hemlock. Now, where sometimes we've recommended players to hipfire some of these weapons, this is definitely not one of those weapons, especially with the nerfs it got in Season 9. To control the recoil of this gun, it's actually pretty easy. The first 3 bursts of the gun go straight up with a slight trailing off to the left and right every other shot. After the 4th burst, the bursts get a little bit more sporadic and bounce horizontally during shots. To counter it, all you have to do is slightly pull down and to the left and to the right in that order. Every burst switches the way that the recoil of this weapon shoots. Mastering recoils is not a small feat. With so many weapons in Apex and everyone having their preferences, this is why practicing with as many different types of weapons as possible, but still focusing on your favorites, is the key to consistency. If you rely on only one gun or a single loadout, you'll find Apex to be a pretty difficult game, to say the least. So seriously guys, practicing in the firing range will be your key to success in achieving your goal of mastering recoil. Grab yourself a purple or gold bag in whatever weapon you want to get better with, and fill your bag to the brim with ammo and go for it. One thing to keep in mind guys is you should not grab any attachments besides an extended mag for the weapons. To start, find a flat stone wall and stand near it and empty your entire mag without trying to control the gun at all. Do this enough time to where you can examine the entire spray pattern on the wall and feel like you can visualize it in your head. Once you do that, you need to try to get down the patterns that we just talked about for all the guns. You need to figure out which way you need to pull for each gun. How far do you need to pull down, to the left, down to the right, to the left, to the right? These things are important to think about, because once you do get them down, you're going to be confident using all these guns. One way that a lot of players get good is just trying every gun and being comfortable with it. You should be able to pick up any gun off spawn because you can be confident with it. If you do that, you're going to find a ton more success in all of your games. The best players in the game can literally down people with any weapon, because sometimes you have to. Off spawn, you're not going to get the best loadout that you were looking for the entire game. So seriously guys, I recommend doing this with any automatic weapon and even semi-auto weapons if you want to spam them, because it's beneficial for feeling more confident with any weapon that you might come across. One thing that can help you take it to the next level is to aim small and miss small by targeting only the head on the dummies in the firing range. So seriously guys, for this one, the biggest thing is to practice. You need to load into the firing range and try the guns that you're not good with. And if you think you're good with a gun, then test it out. Try the tips that we talked about and put them into practice. Alright guys, we've gone over all the major weapons that you're going to want to be on the lookout for while in a game, and the best ways that we have found to practice the recoil pattern for each of them. Spending the time in the firing range to get better at this is going to be crucial in one-clipping people consistently. We know you guys can do it. So guys, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to take your best shot at the like button and make sure to sub so you don't miss any of our new videos that we have coming out for you guys. Anyway, my name has been Valued. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.